Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started here in just about a minute. Just want to make sure that audio is good and that everybody can see the presentation. So if somebody would just let us know, that would be great. Thank you for that. Somebody is a fast typer. So we're right at 9 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. As we always do before we begin, a couple housekeeping items to go over. Many of you have joined these, so you know what the drill is. But we have in the handout section, we have the course intro statement that Virginia requires us to distribute, so you can download that. This is approved for a 1-hour life and health CE, and in order to get that CE, you've got to show up in the GoToWebinar attendance, and you have to remain attending the event for at least 50 minutes. And throughout the presentation, about 15 minutes in, 30 minutes in, and then about 45 minutes right towards the end, we're going to launch poll questions. And the poll questions need to be answered. They're simple. They're just really inquisitive questions, but you don't have to get anything right. Just make sure you answer the questions so we know that you are participating. That's also a requirement. Today we have Xywave joining us. Xywave actually is also sponsoring the CE. So not only are they presenting, they are a sponsor. So we want to thank them very much for doing that, as well supporting the state chapter. Alex is with us today. Alex Lawton is the regional sales manager for Xywave, and he actually is out of their corporate office. We were just talking about that in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And as a Xywave employee, he has worked with agencies ranging from, that sole proprietor agency all the way across the board to the fastest growing agencies, national agencies in the country with over 1,000 employees. So a wide range of agencies that he's working with. His area of focus is elevating an agency's approach to using technology in order to tackle today's very complex insurance market, and I would say ever-changing. So I'm going to pass this over to Alex, and we will get going here with the CE. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you for the introduction. Excited to present this to everyone here today. Looking forward to sharing some things about the technology landscape in InsurTech and being able to leverage this in your daily operations. So just some quick facts about Xywave to give you a background and understand where some of this information we're pulling from. We've got about 1,000 employees worldwide. We operate in 4 different countries. We've got 15,000 agencies that we work with, 100 of the top 100. We've been in business for 25 years, and we've made 4 acquisitions in the last 2 quarters. And the reason that I bring that up is that M&A is something that has been extremely hot in the marketplace, not only on the brokerage side, but also in the insurance technology space. Things are constantly evolving, constantly changing, and it's important, right? And that's why we're having this conversation today, to keep up on everything that's going on. So where the industry is at today is there is a skyrocketing amount of M&A. There were 600 plus acquisitions in 2018, 2019, 2020 tracked above that as well. And we're already seeing in 2021 that's pacing to break that number yet again. One of the agencies that I worked with buys about 10 to 12 agencies per month. And one of the things that we're noticing is the fact that COVID or the pandemic made a lot of people reevaluate, do we want to be in this game long term, or they hit some challenges, whether it was a benefits shop or a commercial line shop, and it forced them to go ahead and sell their book of business to someone that had been approaching them constantly. It's a huge difference from just 6 years ago when there was fewer than 100 deals in that space. So there's a lot of agencies that are kind of popping up and growing overnight. M&A is certainly a hot component to the marketplace. regulations are changing. Anytime you go from a Republican to a Democratic regime or Democrat to Republican, there's going to be a lot of reversals. There's going to be a lot of new mandates. There's going to be a lot of new legislation. So Biden has signed more executive orders than any recent president during his first month in office. There's a lot of things that are changing. Sometimes with these COVID laws, it's based on federal, and then it's at the state and then the local level, and it's constantly evolving and changing. Clients need your help to be able to stay on top of those legislative changes. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments here. And then the last piece to this is that digital is really no longer a nice to have, it's a must have. Today's buyers demand some sort of technology experience, a digital customer experience. And if you aren't providing that, oftentimes they'll go look somewhere else, or in a competitive selling situation, it can be a challenge to earn that broker of record. So skyrocketing M&A, things are evolving and changing very quickly on the legislative front, and digital is something that's becoming a must-have, not a nice-to-have. And the culmination of all of this is all these different challenges that you're seeing on the screen. The first one on the top left that we'll talk about are going to be inefficiencies. Now that could be, we have our data in disparate systems. We've got our agency management system. We have our shared drives. We've got things spread out across multiple platforms, and that becomes cumbersome. And a lot of agencies realized when the pandemic hit, they maybe weren't prepared to go fully remote, and it caused a bandwidth issue, right? If someone left or you couldn't get onto the VPN, you were struggling to be able to access critical information. Inefficient processes are something that every agency is trying to tackle in today's landscape. Time is money. And if you're not able to have the correct processes internally to be efficient and effective with quick response and lead time back to clients, quick negotiation and interaction with the carriers, right? Sometimes that puts us at a competitive disadvantage. One of the biggest challenges for an agency is going to be the quoting and renewal process, right? Everybody talks about Q4, or your book of business could be timed up where most of your renewals come July 1st, whatever that might be. When I first started at Xywave 6 or 7 years ago, agencies used to joke with me that in Q4 they were setting up cots and people were sleeping overnight because things are so crazy and hectic, right? So inefficiencies when it comes to our quoting process, our renewals, those are really large challenges that a lot of technology can solve. Organic growth is something that agencies constantly strive for. Typically on any given month, I'm meeting with well over 100 agencies, and some agencies are hitting double-digit growth, some are flat. That's where the M&A comes into play. A lot of agencies are growing by buying other agencies, but to actually organically grow can be a challenge. And there's a couple of different things that we talk about in terms of technology to be able to solve those problems, right? The first thing that we need to focus on for organic growth is how do we fill the top of the pipeline? The top of the pipeline is where we're going to create the opportunities to close the business. And something that a lot of agencies have pointed out to Xywave over the past 18 months with the pandemic, there may have been a lot of prospects that froze. They didn't want to make a decision, but now that things are starting to open back up again, they might be ready to make a move. So top of the pipeline is extremely critical. The other component to organic growth is going to be how we differentiate in our conversation, right? How do we elevate our service? How do we elevate our sales experience to make it easier to unseat the incumbent broker consultant? Top heavy service model, right? The 80-20 rule. 80% of our business comes from 20% of our book, right? But 80% of our time sometimes goes to that smaller carve out. So how do we create those processes, going back to inefficiencies, to make sure that we've got touch points across the entire book of business? Sales process. When we talk through how do we have a more efficient sales process, how do we have a better sales process? A lot of the times, if we've got one or two producers, we have a team, if we take a step back and look, more than likely, they're all doing different processes. How do we replicate it? How do we make it so that we bring on a new producer, we can quickly introduce that to them and make sure that they can win? Commission tracking, variance, and reconciliation. ADP did a study about 2 years ago that there's roughly a 7% variance in commission payouts from the carriers. It's really important that you've got a process in play to double check that there was an agency up in New York that I spoke with 2 weeks ago that when they ran through their commissions realized they were short about $100,000. I've also been told that some of the carriers are beginning to put riders in the contracts where if the variance isn't caught within a year of the effective date, then you don't get paid out on it. So we need to make sure that we've got some technology and processes in place to make sure that we're constantly checking on that. Best practice is to look at that on a monthly or a quarterly basis. Client retention, it's always been a challenge, but it's a challenge that's got new pressures and new competitors coming to light. We're working against sometimes PEOs if we're not working with them, payroll vendors. A lot of agencies don't realize that the 20th largest brokerage in the country is a payroll vendor. So we need to make sure that we've got solutions, digital touch points, things that can help keep us top of mind and build a barrier, a wall around our book of business. Producer failure rate is something that a lot of agencies struggle with. Typically 2/3 of producers will fail. They will never validate. And one of the challenges that we see in play is when a new producer comes on board, they're given some leads, they're told to cold call, create some opportunities, and then someone will mentor them along the way. There's no real process in place. There's no coaching and guidance. It's just kind of fly by the seat of your pants. That's why we're seeing such a high producer failure rate. It's important that we've got things in place to be able to educate them, to help them speak and sound like an industry expert if they're green to insurance, and make sure that they've got processes in place to be successful. Agency differentiation is a classic challenge that agencies have struggled with since about 2012, right? As we started to have ACA come into play, price commissions are being compressed. When we walk in, how do we differentiate ourselves outside of we have a great service model, right? Leveraging technology can help tell a different story. Feature selling is something that a lot of agencies have a question on. What exactly is feature selling, right? So when we talk about going into a competitive selling situation and someone has an online enrollment platform and you don't, someone might have access to an HR hotline and you don't, being able to take all those different features and wrap them into one solution. One of the most popular trends that we're starting to see, whether it's someone working with Xywave or a different solution, they'll kind of white label the package and they'll rebrand it and they'll make it almost their own little HR group underneath the benefits book so that they can sell the entire package, the entire solution, instead of just feature selling. Digital marketing strategy. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a few moments, but it's really important, very impactful that we have a digital marketing strategy in play, right? Referrals are extremely important, but we did see for the last 12 to 16 months, there was a lack of opportunity to get out in front of people. A lot of people prefer a remote meeting. They prefer a remote sales experience. So we do need to make sure outside of the typical drop-ins, referrals, working our centers of influence, we have a digital marketing strategy in play. Lisa, I believe at about the 13 to 15 minute mark, you guys wanted to stop and do a poll. Is this a good time to do that?
Let's do it. Amanda, you want to launch
Yep.
it?
I'll
Thank you.
do it now.
That's a quick one. So we've got about, looks like almost everybody's voted. So are you using technology in your agency? Oh, wow. We have 100% that said yes. So that's awesome. And close it out.
Outstanding. 100% using technology. That's fantastic. So when we talk through these broker challenges, whether they're centered around scaling the business, differentiating yourself, solving internal processes, the abundance of pressure and forces against the insurance industry, new competitors, new players coming in, it's happening overnight. Something to think about, and obviously you're not able to answer this, but look through these different challenges and think through, of these challenges, what are a few that really stick out to you? And how do you game plan to be able to start solving those problems as we get into Q3, 4 of 2021 and beyond. One of the things that Xywave does is spends a lot of time, energy, and money working with third parties to survey our current customers, which we have 15,000, and prospective customers. I can also include this, Lisa, and have this shout out to the group. We have a broker services survey that goes ahead and breaks down all of the different things that clients want and then challenges that brokerages have. So 98% of clients want answers on compliance-related questions, right? That's going to be ACA, COBRA, FMLA, HIPAA. And when we talk through technology, there's a couple of different ways that we could solve that problem. We could invest and work with a company that has an HR hotline. We could start to build out our own repository of content to be able to distribute out. We can research that information. The challenge is oftentimes we don't have the time to do the research and identify the information, and it might be a little bit subject to error. We might be Googling something, it could be outdated, we could be getting it from an incorrect source. So when we're answering these questions, there are ways to leverage technology to be able to stay on top of that. 96% of clients want a brokerage consultant to provide resources on HR topics, as well as the actual policies themselves, the forms, right, the deliverables. One of the things that a lot of agencies are dealing with right now are going to be your FMLA type questions. There's constant changes when it comes to the packages that these employees are receiving. We dealt with a lot of furloughs last year. So HR related topics, 96% of clients need to see that. 95% would like online access to policies, compliance, and HR solutions. That digital customer experience that I discussed before is really important. It's a fantastic barrier for entry to keep other brokerage firms away from your book of business. But it's also going to create a more efficient service model, right? If we're able to have touch points digitally with those clients, it helps elevate that service experience. The last component here is that 93% of clients would like their broker to provide customized employee benefits booklets. Benefit booklets are something that a lot of the payroll vendors have started offering because they know that the small and mid-market brokerages may not have the bandwidth to be able to do that for every single customer. They're using it as a logjam. 93% would like to have that employee benefits booklet. That could be a robust booklet. I am starting to see a lot of agencies come in with a smaller pamphlet, maybe 2 or 3 pages, but they would like something that's customized to their logo, to their look and feel, that's really simple, aesthetically pleasing, easy for their employees to digest. Some of the top challenges that benefits brokers are facing today, the first one's going to be managing healthcare costs. Right? Everyone knows that healthcare costs are on the rise. It's really difficult to be able to control that. There's a lot of different methods and approaches, right? We can level fund, we can self-fund. There's a lot of different vehicles that we can try and take advantage of. At the end of the day, that's one of the biggest challenges for a brokerage, and it's one of the biggest things that a customer is going to challenge you on. Keeping up to date on regulatory changes, right? That's based on the feedback we got from agencies, 43%, so that's one of their biggest challenges. When you think about how quickly the gavel drops at a federal level and then the ripple effect across state lines, it's very difficult to keep up to date with that, right? If we're leveraging technology, there are vendors out there, Xywave included, that has the ability to hit that to your inbox or give it to you on demand as soon as that gavel drops. It's important that we take a look at ways to identify that information from trusted and credible sources. If we're trying to look that up on our own, oftentimes that's going to be outdated, or we may have difficulties interpreting that. It's important that we get that at an 8th grade reading level to our clients and to our prospects so it's easy for them to digest. 28% would like some sort of education on employees and health and wellness. When we talk about the culture of an organization, there are a lot of companies that are leveraging health and wellness programs as a recruiting solution, but they're also doing it to retain their employees. For example, here at Xywave, we've got stipend to be able to go and exercise, choose a facility, and reduce that cost to encourage us to go and stay on top of our health and wellness. There is a full broker services survey that will be sent out to the group that'll go through both employer challenges as well as what customers are looking for. Now, 100% of the group explain that they have technology, which is fantastic. It's mission critical in today's marketplace. What we're noticing is that there are 3 buckets that agencies typically fall under when it comes to their technology solutions. On the left-hand side, we've got reactive and disconnected. So they have technology, right? They're purchasing it reactively. An example of that would be you're coming up on a renewal in the fourth quarter, a client reaches out to you, lets you know they're looking at another brokerage and they have an online enrollment solution and you do not. At that point, pick up the phone, start calling all the different vendors. You try and find the best one that's the best fit, at the best price. You bring it on board, you use it for that one client, and then it sits on the shelf and it doesn't get used, right? That's a reactive and disconnected approach. What we're noticing is that a lot of those agencies that are falling on the left that are reactive and disconnected are typically the ones that are selling off, they're struggling to grow, or they have some retention gaps. Those are agencies that, based on surveys in the marketplace and research that we paid third-party consultants to conduct, in the next 5 to 10 years, they will be acquired. In the middle, you've got agencies that are committed to making changes, but their tech stack is not fully integrated. It's not fully connected. So they might have an agency management system, an online enrollment solution. They might have a quoting solution. None of them speak. So they're having to enter that data into 3 different places. It's not efficient. It becomes a massive time suck. And when we get into our renewal season, it's really difficult to stay on top of and maintain all that data. That's why a lot of agencies tend to have to bring someone in to help them with that, or they end up sunsetting solutions because they just don't have the time to use it. On the far right is where we're seeing high growth competitive agencies focus. How do we get proactive and connected solutions? How do we have technology that speaks to one another? We would like to have our agency management system speak to our quoting system, to our online enrollment solution. A lot of vendors out there, Xywave included, are starting to offer an open API where you can build out those integrations. Some of them are not. When you are evaluating technology vendors, it's extremely important you ask questions about integrations and where those solutions are able to work with others to make your life easier. So we've got reactive and disconnected. Those are agencies that we anticipate in the next 5 to 10 years will be acquired. In the middle, we're committed to change, but it's not fully connected. And on the right-hand side, we are a fully connected and integrated agency. Really important when you're buying technology solutions, ask about integrations. Does that technology speak to other platforms? Some of the biggest challenges that we've talked about from that previous slide, just to drill into these a little bit, we've got more conversation around operational inefficiencies. Stop and think for a moment, what's the biggest gap in terms of your operational efficiency, right? What's the biggest time suck in your day? How do we solve that problem? How much time would that get back in your day? And what would you rather be doing with that time? That could be for renewals. It could be for client interaction. It could be in our sales process. It's really important that we take a look at where our operational inefficiencies fall and try and come up with game plans to fix those issues. Non-differentiating pitch. We talked about this before. There's a lot of agencies that are walking in and still just talking about the service, and that's great. Service is extremely important. At the end of the day, what do we do different? Everyone on the call has probably been in the competitive selling situation where the prospect, the difficult one, says, I've met with 2 other agencies today. Everybody talked about how great their service was, how great their pricing is, and that they can come up with some creative funding opportunities. What do you do that actually makes you different? It's important we think about our pitch. How do we differentiate? How do we tell a better story? And how do we take our technology solutions and wrap it into that story? Lack of transparency. So one of the things on the broker services survey, if you take a look at it when we send it over, transparency means a lot of the times the buyer doesn't know where all the money's going, right? They know they've got their premium, they cut the checks, they pay it, and they move on. They'd like to know more about what commission the broker's getting. How do they earn that? Because in a competitive selling situation, what we've seen really great agencies do is sometimes they'll call that out, right? This is how much your broker's making. What do they do to actually earn that commission? So lack of transparency is a challenge. 8% loss, 5% growth, and reduced compressed commission. So the industry average on retention is right at about 92%. So we're losing about 8% of our book. We're only hitting somewhere between 3 to 5% growth. So that means we're losing money sometimes, right? So how do we find ways to be able to protect our book of business? We talked about leveraging technology solutions to build that wall around your book so that as we're growing and we're writing new business, we're operating on the correct trajectory. Producer failure rate, as we talked about before, 66% of the times producers do not validate, right? How do we create processes that are efficient? How do we onboard them? How do we make sure that they have the tools to be successful and win in today's marketplace? And then the last piece is oftentimes premium price. That tends to be king. Really important that we're trying to tell a different story outside of price and service to be able to win that business. When we talk about to really help wrap your head around what does reactive and disconnected look like versus what does an actual integrated platform look like, when we talk through solutions, that old world component, it's not just a challenge for you, the broker, it's also a challenge for your client, right? So take a step back and think right now in my technology stack, what speaks, what doesn't speak, but what does that experience look like for my clients? If they're having to log into one portal to do their enrollments, if they're logging into another portal to be able to get information on HR, if they're logging into a third portal to be able to get their information on compliance, that's a difficult process. It's something that we call portal fatigue. And when you think about it, at the end of the day, most of you probably have 4, 5, 6, 7 portals that you'll log into in any given week. That same issue or challenge is compounded and passed along to your clients. Portal fatigue. The third, the fourth, the fifth portal on that list tends to fall off and be deprioritized. A lot of the times, the number one portal they're logging into is going to be their payroll vendor, right? Got to pay their people. So how do we find ways to connect those technologies so it's one experience, or they only have 2 or 3 entry points as opposed to 6 or 7, right? So that's what we're talking about, disparate solutions. We want to make sure that we're consolidating. We're in that new world. They can log into a solution and it's got the ability to single sign on, jump from platform to platform. And remember, when we're looking at these issues, don't just view it through your lens of the brokerage. It's important that we take a look at that and we evaluate it from the client's perspective as well. That's just as, if not more important, because they're the ones that keep the lights on, right? They're cutting the commission checks. Lisa, I know we have another poll question before I transition here. If you guys want to go ahead and shoot that one out.
Great, thank you. Do you see yourself getting more involved with technology in the future? Looks like everybody has voted and you're at 100% again. So this group is really embracing technology. Good to see that.
Outstanding. So 100% of the group sees themselves getting more involved with technology. I think it's important that we address the biggest issue when purchasing technology, and it's something that agencies always have trepidations around, and it is 100% a valid concern. Are we actually going to be able to use the solution? Can we execute with it? So there's really 3 things that you need to ask yourself or ask your vendor as you're getting started. The first thing is we're going to want to see what the implementation and training process looks like. right? If we don't know how to effectively use the solutions, it's going to be really difficult to use them long term. We're also going to want to make sure that there's a training process in play that we can follow a cadence. It's not just a quick webinar, here you go, figure it out. So the first thing we want to take a look and analyze the implementation and training process. The second thing is we want to make sure that there is an ongoing communication between the vendor and yourself, right? Proactive touch points, being able to jump into a meeting, a virtual meeting, and walk through challenges that you're having, come up with new strategies, kind of refresh everything. So number one is implementation and training. Number two, want to make sure we've got open lines of communication. And the third thing, and this is something that agencies don't always think about, if you feel as though you're going to grow the footprint of your agency, you're going to add some producers, you're going to add customer service representatives or account managers. Very important that you ask what the process looks like when you bring in new employees. Because the last thing you're going to want to do is stop and pause your regular day-to-day to try and train someone on those solutions. You need to make sure that they have processes in place to get them up and running, get them trained, and make sure they're efficient. So those are the three things we need to ask when we're buying new solutions to make sure that we're going to get the correct utilization out of it. Now, when we talk about the experience of selling and servicing in a virtual world, right, this digital revolution that we're facing from the pandemic really escalated how quickly we need to start using these solutions. So the first thing I want to call out here, with all due respect, I do disagree with our marketing team a little bit on this. I think referrals are not the old way. I think referrals are still extremely important in your sales process. They're warmer leads, they're great opportunities, they're easier to build rapport with, and a lot of the times you can move them across the finish line faster in the sales process. Face-to-face meetings, depending upon where you fall on the COVID comfortability or where your customers and prospects fall, they might not be doing a lot of face-to-face meetings. And quite frankly, it's a lot more efficient to be able to run them virtually. Drop-ins are something that we're starting to see come back a little bit, but there are a lot of organizations that are a little bit uncomfortable having people just dropping in. And then we've got a lot of manual task handoffs. So I'm sure a lot of your teams, once the pandemic hit and people had to work from home, we're trying to figure out ways that we can automate. How can we make things quicker? Before we were able to set up a meeting in the office to talk through everything, now we've got to do it remote. So where we're seeing high growth competitive agency shift is towards the new way, which is selling more digitally. So they're digitally marketing. That could be a couple of different things. That could be getting content up on our platform, on our website. That could be trying to get into search engine optimization. That could be marketing on social media, right? LinkedIn, very powerful medium. That could be setting up drip marketing campaigns. It could be tying in a cold calling sales play to wrap into that. And then even trying to come up with some click to purchase type components. So digital marketing, targeted content, making sure we've got a brand built online. For virtual meetings, we want to make sure that we can run a compelling virtual meeting, right? In the past, we'd be able to sit down and have a conversation with someone face to face. Now it's a little bit more difficult. We got to get into the meeting. Sometimes there's technical difficulties. Really important when your team is in a virtual meeting that they have some sort of compelling content, something that the prospect or the client can touch and feel and see, and you can shoot over as a follow-up to help land your points better. Social media selling, we just talked about a little bit. LinkedIn tends to be the most popular in the employee benefit space. Facebook, Twitter, they work. A lot of the times that'll work better for your individual as opposed to your group health. So we're seeing a lot of agencies are leveraging things on LinkedIn. It's really, really impactful if you start doing some videos on thought leadership, putting some content out there, making some challenging statements, right? Some counter points aren't always a bad thing. It's good to have a little bit of collision on there. It helps gain some traction. And then the last piece are going to be automated workflows and handoffs. So that's going to be making sure that if we do bring on a client, we've got a process that's remote, digital, automated, where we can get them onboarded, enrolled, have a really nice customer experience, nice and smooth. The renewal meeting has evolved, right? And we'll talk about that in a moment here. With respect to servicing in a digital world. There was in the past a lot of reactive manual servicing. We're getting a lot of phone calls from clients. We're servicing in that regard. We're doing a lot of face-to-face meetings. On-site enrollments. The percentage of on-site enrollments dropped off heavily last year, obviously due to the pandemic. That's a challenge that a lot of agencies had to figure out. How do we navigate around this? How do we have the processes? How do we have the solutions to be able to counter that? There was a hands-on, paper-driven onboarding process, and there were passive assumptive renewals. Where we're seeing agencies transition to the right is they're trying to have a more proactive digital service model. That could be touch points via email. That could be trying to engage with them on social media. That's obviously going to be your phone calls, but it's making sure that they have a touch point with them more often than just the 30, 60, 90 days leading up to their renewal. Again, we're running virtual meetings. That's where those benefit booklets come into play. Oftentimes it's really simple to be able to show that to the employees in a go-to meeting, in a Teams meeting, in a Zoom call, to be able to drive home the point. Spreadsheets sometimes can be difficult for them to digest. So having those benefit booklets can make for a really nice virtual meeting. Stewardship reports are something that we're seeing a lot of agencies leveraging in virtual meetings and successfully doing so. Online elections and paperless enrollment. I highly encourage you, if you do not have one of those solutions, to go out and start looking for one today, or you might get it through somebody else, but that's table stakes. We need to be able to offer that to our insureds to make sure that they have a digital experience. Again, the number of on-site enrollments are dropping off. Virtual training and risk management. So the risk management component, I understand, is going to be a little bit on the commercial line side, but we are seeing a lot of agencies investing in a solution to be able to have their employer groups train their employees remotely. Whether that's going to be harassment trainings, it could be active shooter trainings, it could be remote, working remote trainings. From a risk management standpoint, we are seeing some benefits. Agencies, when they buy a solution like that, it has some of those elements in it. They'll offer it up to their employer groups simply because they may have a need for it. Really important to note, when it comes to training employees, the cost is typically $25 per employee per course. The larger the group, the higher the cost. Back when New York was one of the leaders mandating harassment training, when they first dropped the gavel and the law went into place, there were payroll vendors and attorney groups charging upwards of $75 to $100 per head. There was an agency that I worked with on Long Island that had a 150 life group paying $50,000 to get their people trained. So that's something to evaluate. Zywave is a vendor that has that. There are a lot of other vendors that have solutions, but I would encourage you to take a look at how do we find ways to virtually train our employer group's employees. And then a focus on cost savings. So in the past, we might have been a little bit efficient where we're driving to 3 or 4 meetings in a day. Now we can run 6 virtually, right? So they're focusing on how can we reduce our costs and operate more efficiently. There's an ebook that will be going out to everyone called The Sales Revolution, Digital Disruption Demystified. It was written by Don Bailey and Jason Liu is our CEO. Don Bailey's an advisor. He's worked for some of the largest organizations in the insurance side. It's a simple read. It takes about 2-3 hours tops. It's a couple of chapters, about 50 pages total. I highly recommend you take a peek at it. If anything, you might have a couple of sales marketing plays. You might have some pitches or differentiation components that you can take away from it. But it's going to take a lot of the things we talked about today and wrap it into this ebook. So that will be going out to everyone. The last component that we're going to talk through this morning are going to be core business solutions. So everyone on the call mentioned that they have technology, and everyone on the call said that they see themselves getting more invested into technology. There's 6 buckets. So with the 15,000 clients that we have, we went out, surveyed them, and identified whether it's a manual process they have today or a solution that they've bought, Zywave or another vendor. These are the 6 core solutions. The first one is going to be an account management system. How do we make sure that we have the ability to track all of our plan information, our commissions, our RFPs, all of our client data and files? And how do we make sure that we can get that to them on demand? If the client calls today and we're having to go through our email, if we're having to go through a shared drive, if we're having to try and find notes, we might not get them an answer in real time. We'll tell them we'll call them back. We want to elevate our customer service experience, and account management system can help drive that home. Customer relationship management. This is going to be a lot more from a sales perspective. Now, this can blend into your account management system. There are other solutions out there that are CRM alone. It's helping us track our revenue, our pipeline, make sure that we can forecast. We're starting to see a lot of agencies, even smaller agencies, setting goals, forecasting, making sure that they hold people accountable to try and grow. One of the biggest challenges that we're seeing with the heavy M&A in the marketplace is the fact that a lot of these large brokerages, when they buy a local agency, they're not rebranding them right away. They're letting them fly their flag. They're just giving them all the resources and the backing power. So it's important that we've got some of these solutions in play, and we're getting a little bit tighter on our goals and our metrics to be able to win. On the far right there, configure, price, quote. It's a quoting solution. CPQ is the acronym that's used in the industry. So it's how do we take our information, aggregate it into one system so that we're not trying to go to multiple carriers and quote the information, load the census in a billion different times. CPQ is something that's really hot in the small group marketplace where we can shop all of our ACA or level funded plans, and it helps reduce the amount of time. Typically, when we work with agencies, they tell us that it takes them anywhere from 1 to 2 business days to be able to turn everything around. With quoting solutions, whether it's iWave or another, you can cut that lead time down to hours and help get that information over to the client quicker, right? Speed to delivery can help win. Marketing automation. This is one of the buckets that a lot of agencies are investing in right now, whether it's iWave or another solution. Being able to take content, being able to take concepts, being able to take ideas, automate, getting that out to your book of business, but also to your prospective clients. Couple of questions when buying marketing automation that you need to ask yourself. Number one, can I track those interactions so that I can follow up and follow through? Number two, where is that coming from? Is that going to be coming from my URL, or is that going to be coming from a different one, right? I want that recognition. I want it coming back to me. The bottom middle bucket there, content, that's going to cover HR. That's going to cover compliance. That's going to cover benefits education, right? Where do we get that content from? We could be grabbing it from a carrier. We could be drafting some of it, but where are we storing it? There are a lot of agencies that are investing in what's called content management systems, where they can store and house all of their content. They can customize it in that platform, and it is a cloud-based product. When the pandemic hit, there were a lot of agencies that had that stuff on shared drives, and it became a bit of a challenge to try and get that out in front of their prospective and current customers, but also they found a lot of duplication of content because teams weren't able to speak and see everything in one place. So content management. On the far right, client software in the benefit space is one of the hottest components. Portals, tools, trainings, online enrollment, HR portals, those trainings that we talked about. Important when we get the client software or we're evaluating it, that we have a very strong rollout game plan, right? The last thing we want to do is just hit send and hope people log into it. Oftentimes when agencies don't have good utilization of client software, one of the things that we'll ask them is, are we proactively telling our clients about this? Are we bringing up in certain situations that they could have used the portal to try and spike their interest in it? And when we're selling it to them, are we just saying, hey, we've got a portal, or are we telling a compelling story? That's something that's really important when rolling out client software. We have to have a game plan. I recommend segmenting your book of business to roll that out and make sure that there's some really tight messaging to get people up and running on that and make sure you get return on investment. So those are your 6 core business solutions that every benefits agency needs, whether it's manual processes or technology. Obviously, with technology, it's going to be a lot more efficient, and you're going to be able to outsource that. And I think we have one last poll, Lisa. Is that correct?
We do. Go ahead and launch that. Where do you see the most value with technology? Time savings, personalization, AI functions, access to data. And I'm not sure if you can select multiple ones. I forget how this was set up. About half the people voted here. We'll wait about 10 more seconds. And then I do have a question that's come in too, that if anybody has any other questions, certainly Alex wanting to take questions at the end, and then he'll talk about some Xywave solutions. So it looks like everybody has voted. 88% says time savings, so that's the number one. Access to data is at 76%. 41% tied for personalization and AI. So time savings is the first one, and then access to data is number two. So there's a question here. It says, what is the purpose of stewardship meetings? And I also wrote down that word when you said that, because I haven't really heard that being used before. Can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. So to have a stewardship meeting would be to sit down with the client and have a conversation around all the things that they might not be seeing you do in the background. So they're talking through, we took X amount of phone calls from you and invested this much time, right? We responded to this many emails. We answered these types of questions for your employees. So it's taking all of the things that you've done for them over the past year and bringing that to light, instead of just having an assumptive renewal conversation, really selling your value and your service model, and bringing that to the forefront to have a conversation around it. It's a great question.
I think that's probably even more relevant today with, commissions having to be disclosed, and just, they don't see all the stuff that you guys are doing behind the scenes. So, so if there's any other questions, please post them. So why don't you go ahead and speak about Xywave. Again, thank you for sponsoring this. Also want to give you the opportunity to share what you have to offer to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to pull something else up on the screen here real quick.
We're waiting for that. I'll mention, when I process the CEs and send out the certificate, we will send out the two pieces that he has mentioned, the ebook, and then there was also something else in the beginning. Alex,
the broker services survey.
Oh, yes. So we'll get that out to you.
Yep. Awesome. So Xywave, some of you on the call might be current customers. Some of you might be prospective customers, some former customers. We've evolved considerably in the last 2.5, 3 years. So if you're not with Xywave now, in the past, what you probably saw was 28, 29 different point products. And quite frankly, that's a little bit difficult to consume. So when we talk about the digital revolution, how do we elevate technology in the insurance industry, we decided that it'd be best to go down and consolidate to 4 clouds. So those 28 point products got moved into 4 clouds. So there's the sales cloud, the client cloud, the content cloud, and the analytics cloud. So the sales cloud is where you're going to have your database of prospective customers. It'll have 5,500 information, contacts, integrations to LinkedIn to be able to run sales and marketing plays. All those prospects can be quickly exported into the email marketing component of the sales cloud to start drip marketing out to them, right? So that's where we're going to have the ability to create our renewal presentations, our stewardship reports, our prospect presentations, grab our prospect data, and start to automatically reach out to them. The client cloud is where we're going to have the ability to create wrap documents. We're going to have a hotline. We're going to have a learning management system, that virtual training we talked about. It's going to help arc the touch point, get it directly in front of the client. Client will be able to access HR compliance content in that portal. And then there's also an enrollment and onboarding component to the Client Cloud as well. The Content Cloud is the repository. For those of you familiar with Xywave, that's the old broker briefcase, probably one of the products everybody knows. It's a flagship product of ours. So the Content Cloud is broker briefcase. It just has more content, more integrations. You can customize content in the platform. And then it is a content management system. So you can start storing all of your content in one place for your teams to access. The last piece is going to be the Analytics Cloud. That's where you've got your analytics, looking into plan design, pharmaceutical spend, all those different components. Typically for our employees or our employer groups, they're going to be using it for 250 employees and above, typically self-funded. Fully insured, it's going to be dependent upon the carrier. But those are the 4 clouds: Sales Cloud, Client Cloud, Content Cloud, Analytics Cloud. We are acquiring heavily 4 companies in the last 2 quarters, and we're on pace based on our M&A pipeline to buy another 3 or 4 before the end of this year. So if you haven't seen Xywave in a while, definitely recommend you check it out. It's not the same Xywave you probably saw in the past. For those of you that are current customers, we appreciate your business. Make sure you're getting in touch with your customer success manager and continuing to work your sales, marketing, and retention plays.
Do you have in any of those clouds, I get asked this often about benchmarking, participation, contribution, is that available?
Yes, so that is going to be in the Sales Cloud. There is a quoting and renewal solution, a CPQ tool, where you can do your benchmarking, contribution modeling, all those types of things.
Great. So we'll give it another minute, see if anybody else has any other questions before we close out. Where would online benefit enrollment be in these clouds?
That would be in the Client Cloud.
Is there, in addition to the benefit enrollment, is there HR functionality? I don't know, like in addition to the training, maybe onboarding or asset tracking, property skill training or skill tracking or certifications?
Great question. So the enrollment and onboarding tool does have an HR and task manager, so it will do the onboarding for you. And it also, with that HR and task manager, has the ability to take files and ship it out to the employees. So if they need to sign off on something or they completed a certification, that task will close out and it'll be saved in the back end of the system in a specific employee folder.
Let's say that, I got a question here, do you connect with ease? If an agency has a Ben admin, whether it's ease or Employee Navigator, would you connect with those platforms?
Yep, so Employee Navigator we do. We're working through getting an integration built out with ease. Those are the 2 biggest players for enrollment, but Employee Navigator currently, yes.
Okay. I think that may be it. Okay. So thank you everybody for joining, and oh, how soon? One just popped up again. Connecting with ease.
Good question. I'm not sure of the timeline on that. That's something that's on our product roadmap. I don't want to give an incorrect answer.
Yeah. And sometimes when you think it's going to happen, it gets a little bit delayed, not necessarily on your end. We've been through that before too. So.
Yeah, and that's why I don't want to promise this is the date we'll have it.
You expect it this year?
Don't want to overpromise, yeah.
Yeah, but like within the year, would you think? Like this 2021, or are you looking at 2022? Do you know that?
I think that would more than likely be a 2022, because if we're talking about quoting and enrollment, realistically, we'd have to have that done in Q3, because once we hit Q4, they'd have to be live. So I would probably bet on the safer side of saying 2022.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, so again, thank you very much. Great information. Thank you for sponsoring and supporting NAHU and our state chapter, and we will get those documentations out and also the certificate for your CE. So have a great weekend, everyone, and we will talk to you next month.